Good afternoon and welcome to ICE webinars. Today we are joined by Janel Morgan, People Director at King's Hawaiian. She has over 10 years experience in various strategy and execution roles within human resources, and prior to transitioning to King's Hawaiian, she led the organisation development team at Children's Hospital Los Angeles during the height of the pandemic. Janel is a certified leadership coach and is passionate about creating people strategies that allow human beings to thrive and ultimately leads to an organisation's success. ICE webinars would like to thank our sponsor, RSTI. Since 1985, the Radiological Service Training Institute has been providing the finest quality diagnostic imaging training. RSTI and their trained engineers have been reducing the cost of healthcare maintenance for almost 4 decades. With a selection of over 50 courses each year, RSTI has trained over 15,000 service professionals from over 50 different countries in radiology, mammography, CT, ultrasound, networking, PATS and DICOM. So for more information about RSTI, please visit rsti-training.com. Now, just a quick reminder about our 10th anniversary ICE 2024, which we held in a couple of weeks' time at the Hyatt Regency in Irvine, California, February the 18th to the 20th. The Imaging Conference and Expo is the only conference dedicated to imaging directors, radiology administrators, and imaging engineers. ICE offers valuable CE credits from the ASRT and ACI and is a unique community of key decision makers and influential imaging professionals. So for more details, please visit attendice.com and you can use a discount code ICE24-Irvine at the registration. Okay, today's webinar is eligible for 1 Art Category A CE credit by the HRA. You can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey, which will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit, and you'll be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. We'll wrap up today's presentation with a live Q&A, so please submit your questions anytime using the questions feature on your webinar dashboard. Let's kick off today's webinar by giving away one of our ICE gym bags to the attendee that can tell me the answer to the following trivia question. Which city will be hosting the Super Bowl for the first time on Sunday? Answer now using the questions feature on your dashboard, and I'll reveal the answer at the end of the webinar. As I mentioned earlier, Janel Morgan is our presenter today, and she will be discussing Real Talk. Janel, you may begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much for that. Actually, I think you did a great job in introducing me. I don't need to go into any other additional detail. We can just chime right in. So I'm really excited to be with you all here. This is my second time with this group, and got connected back in my Children's Hospital Los Angeles days. Shout out to Mario Pistilli on the line here, one of my great friends, biggest fan, great supporter. So really excited to bring this to you all, especially with the things that the tips and tricks that I've picked up since. So for our time today, truly, I would say that there's about 80, 90%, maybe even 100% of what I'm going to share that you have heard at some point in your life, in your career. Got a good flavor of who's on the line here, different leaders and such, different contributors. So there's nothing here where I think it's going to be, I've never heard this before. But my hope is that I can share it in a way that is sticky for you, one that sticks with you and you can really use it, and also potentially share it in a way where it really helps with your own behavior, your own approach. You know, when I think from a change world, when I was back at CHLA, I definitely delved into the change management world. And oftentimes you'd say you need to hear something 5 to 7 times, especially if it's new, for it to stick once. Research has that bumping up closer to 10 to 15 times. I know that's true for me. So my goal is really a practical time together where you're walking out with more prepared, all the way down to fully prepared for a challenging conversation that you need to have. So for us, it's really critical as adults that when we are learning these things, taking it in, we instantly make it real to us. So I truly today, as I'm talking through, I want you fully present, focused on you. This is your time to really sit, reflect about your own approach and how these tips, these tools can help set you up for success so that you can have a real talk conversation. So let's dive right in. Let's do a little warm up time, get the blood pumping here. So I want you all to think of a time that you had a difficult conversation with a colleague, friend, whoever, and it did not go well. What went wrong? Call this unmute and contribute. So if you are able to unmute and chime in, what's something that went wrong in this conversation? Anyone want to be brave? Call themselves out on what went wrong? Oh, and I know that we have folks joining still. So yeah, question to you all, when you really think about a conversation that did not go well, what's something that happened? Why didn't it go well?
I've had someone comment, just a brief comment saying knee-jerk reaction.
Knee-jerk reaction. Absolutely.
Another comment
Anything
that's
else?
come up is speaking before thinking about the issue.
Oh, what was that?
Speaking before thinking about the issue.
Got it. Yep.
Hang on, they're all coming in now, Janelle.
Totally.
I was ambushed by two employees who clearly had planned ahead and had a laundry list of issues they had saved up for years and unloaded all at once.
Oof. That's a
Some
lot.
of their concerns were so old, I didn't know what they were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. There's lots of reasons, and as I think about this in my most simplest way, it's we are human beings and there is emotion involved with this. There are just lots of complicated things that happen in these conversations that have folks walking away not really feeling well. So as we talk about this today, it's really going to be about how do you best situate you to lean into this conversation so you walk away feeling as best as possible while also really sharing honest things that need to be shared. So let's continue on. You know, when we think about these conversations, especially when I think about the healthcare space, and in particular when I was doing this during the pandemic, there were very real conversations, challenging conversations that have to happen every day. And if we don't handle these well, think about the ones that you just shared, these examples. If they don't get handled well, the quality of the relationship, the success of the project, all of these things, they suffer when we don't navigate these. So when I think about these tips, I truly pull from each of these. I have them as all the tools in my toolkit. I pull from each of these in every conversation that I have. But in particular, these can be, my goal is that you're using them toward a difficult conversation. And when I say that, I mean that the stakes are high. There's really big consequences tied to this. Emotions run strong and opinions differ. So when I think about that, it goes back to why do we even have sessions like this? Why do we even have to have learning around this? And as human beings, we have our defense mechanisms. Okay, our defense mechanisms, again, this is a healthcare environment. I think you guys are rocking and rolling, but the fight, flight, or freeze response that was put in place so that we could survive. So say back to the caveman days, we are running from a saber-toothed tiger. We are fighting a saber-toothed tiger. It's literally our body, our heart pumping blood to our limbs first for us to be able to survive the situation. So our heart is pumping before our brain is thinking. And that is truly, we need to survive, we got to rock and roll. Now, unfortunately, over time, our body doesn't know that we are not running away from a saber-toothed tiger anymore, that we are in a stressful conversation. We're in a stressful meeting. We're having a tough conversation with a significant other, with a child. Our body does not realize that. So that same emotional response is kicking in. So this is where I want you all really thinking about you. What kicks in for you? What defense mechanism activates for you? So I will be very transparent with you. I'll be using myself as an example throughout. I am a flight or freeze person 99.9% of the time. HR was a very interesting path for me to go in as a flight or freeze person, because I've had to lean in to these really challenging conversations pretty regularly. But my natural inclination is, I don't want any part of this. If anything, literally my skeleton feels like it's jumping outside of my body when conflict happens. It wants to jump from my body and run down the street and leave me as just a pile of mush. So this is hugely important for me to know. Now, I did say 99.9% of the time. The only time that I'm really fight is at home with my husband. Now, why? My husband's the person I feel most comfortable with in the world. Most comfortable with. So when we are having conversations, I shift into a different mode. I don't really censor myself as much on those things. So for better or for worse on him, it's usually a compliment that I say this, but then he gets the fight response at times. So I would say for you all, when we are working through your situation, where are you going to go? When your heart starts pumping, what's going to happen? Are you going to be leaning in and you want to jump right back into fight mode, or are you going to want to go away from the conversation? Either which way, those need to be managed for our effective outcome and for us to really have real talk. And when I'm talking about real talk, I want you to be bringing certain elements to life in that. And so we'll walk through those. So, oh, hold on. Apologies, I skipped this slide. So when I'm talking real talk, we're talking about conversations that are always respectful, even if they are uncomfortable in the moment. And believe you me, especially with what I just shared with you about my own defense mechanism, these conversations are I'm wildly uncomfortable throughout them. Honest ideas are exchanged. Notice I say honest. True, what's really going on is out on the table. Positive intent is present, action results in the dialogue, and the quality of the relationship grows. These are the key things that I want you walking out, feeling more equipped and with a plan to bring to life in your conversation. So let's jump ahead then and get right into it. So for you all, I want you to take this moment to really think about the conversation you need to have. And ideally, the difficult conversation, the most difficult conversation you need to have in like the next couple weeks. I need you to make this real for you. And so we'll work through one of my difficult conversations as I go. But this is where, from a logistics check-in, you all have access to the handouts. This would be the worksheet. So I know some folks really, they want to be able to write things down, take notes. Others like to just take it in, listen, whichever way you'd like to do. But this is the time that you can have that worksheet handy, so that at each step of the way, I'm going to ask you questions for you to jot down your notes as far as how you would approach the situation. And don't worry, I will have the questions up on there too. If you're not able to access the handouts, you're not able to see it, I've got the questions, they'll be up on the slide too for you to be able to take notes, do whatever is most helpful for you. So when I think about this, the difficult conversation that I recently just faced. So I have a 7-month-old baby girl at home. And I was returning from my maternity leave in early December. And so I was getting myself prepped about really coming back, and had, be totally honest, a lot of anxiety about it. A lot of anxiety that new parents face in doing this and really managing. I'm, a director over at King's Hawaiian, first-time mom, just a lot going on. How am I going to be able to navigate all of this? And fortunately, I felt really supported, especially when I was about to go on leave. I have a really great relationship with my leader. And P.S., I did get permission to share this story. So I am protecting her, the dignity. I have integrity in this one. But in a conversation before I was coming back from leave, I got on a phone call with my leader, and we were talking through my re-onboarding and on-ramping. And as we were talking through it, the key goals that I had is that I want to understand the business needs happening right now. And I also want to share my needs as far as a working parent right now and a new mom right now. And in that, really thought that it was going to be all good, the things I was asking for. So I was hoping to remain remote through the new year, with me coming back early December. Hey, can I just on-ramp remotely as we're still figuring out daycare, figuring out all of these things. And then also, hey, when I come into work, I've got about an hour commute, got to drop baby girl off at daycare. Is there, I'll probably be coming in closer to 9:30. So my leader, her response was, we've had somebody else in a different position that's no longer with the company that asked to be remote, and we said no, so we can't do that. And 9:30 seems really late. So this caught me way off guard, way off guard. So I literally took a step back and I went through these tips. So let's start with the first one. Begin with the end in mind. This is your first reminder to take a step back, lift your head up, and breathe. Breathing is critical throughout all of this. We need to manage that emotional response that's happening. So in this conversation, I knew without a doubt, I was not going to lean in and have my real talk with my leader in that moment. That doesn't set me up for success. I am somebody that is flight or freeze. If I am pushed, I'm now not going to say what I need to. I'm just going to agree to things just to keep the harmony, keep the peace. And that is not helpful either. That will not set me up for success, and ultimately not set her up for success, because I can't be the best leader and mother that I can be. And those things are intertwined. They're not separate. I'm not two separate people. So when I think about that, I took the step back and said, okay, when the conversation ended, reflected, what do I really want for myself in this situation? What do I really want for the other person? What do I want for our relationship, the team? So I took that step back and really was able to say, okay, what I really want is an and. I want to be the best mom and the best leader that I can be. And I love Kings. I absolutely love this organization. I'm committed. For my leader, I want to situate her for success. My position in particular is almost like her chief of staff. And I get into all kinds of different things, but I'm really there to help her, to force multiply her. So I want to still be able to do that too. I really want to understand, and I want to be able to do that. And I want our relationship to grow. I want to be able to contribute. So for you all, I'll give you just a couple moments here. It's not going to be as much time as you would need, I promise. Not going to be enough time. But that's okay. We're just going to get you to start thinking, because you can take this with you afterward and spend more time on it. Take a couple moments, jot down, think about, what do you really want for yourself in this situation? What do you really want for the other person? What do you want for the relationship, your team, the family, the organization, whatever the context is, whatever makes most sense. Take a few moments to jot down some notes. Okay. Again, as I promised you, not a ton of time, but that is okay. We're just going to keep going. Tip number 2. So now tip number 1 really is the critical starting point. It's that first point of, let me pull my head up and look. The remainder of these tips, they'll go interchangeably with each other. And at times you may lean more into one than the other. But tip number 2, creating safety. Now I'm talking about psychological safety. Yes, depending upon the room you're in, I don't want the room to collapse on you. Yes, physical safety, but creating that psychological safety, that space in where your defense mechanisms are best managed. Ideally, managing the other person's too, but you have no control over someone else. You have no control over their behavior. You only have control of your own. So this is really about what's the space that you can best create that psychological safety. So this is your second reminder to breathe. Remember, let your head catch up with your heart. Let's make sure your body is situated and it knows, hey, this is not a life or death situation right now. This is the situation where I need to think rationally, and I need to lean in, not from my defense mechanisms. The paying attention piece. So from a language perspective, the vast amount of language and communication, it's not the words you say. It's the how, it's body language. Okay, so this is where, if y'all can check out my camera real fast. I'm a huge fan of the virtual world in that it gave me a gift and where I can see my face during meetings. Now I'm not doing this because it's just, I just want to look at myself. It's because I have a resting face that's like this. That is how my face is comfortable. Imagine looking at that face. You don't know me at all, or even if you do know me, and that's the face that you get when you're talking to me, that resting face is one that has absolutely had people walking away from interactions with me thinking that, all the way up to I'm a jerk. I'll have to say, my first time of really getting feedback on this is when I was walking down the hall when I was working in fashion retail. I was working for Lucky Brand, and I was walking down the hall and I was just really stressed, and I could tell, like, I had this kind of face too, like just really squished and really thinking. And my leader stopped me and said, Janelle, are you all right? I said, oh yeah, I'm just really thinking, but this is good. I'm like excited. And she goes, all right, well, tell your face. I was like, okay. So it's critical when you think about yourself in these conversations. Highly recommend look in a mirror. If you, in this virtual space, if you can stand it, depending upon your level of comfort, check out what your face is saying in meetings. Now, I'm not saying sitting there and smiling all the time unnecessarily, not being authentic, totally. And there's a balancing act of where you look and say, is my face, especially in this conversation, inviting someone to be honest with me, inviting someone to put their thoughts on the table. Also, too, in a world full of distractions, this has got to go away in the conversation. Oh, yeah, it's baby girl. It's our Halloween costume. She's our R2-D2. We're a little Star Wars family. So it's got to go away. You know when you're not being paid attention to. We each have had that conversation with someone, a leader, whoever, where they're typing on the computer, typing on their phone, or texting on their phone, and it's like, okay, apparently what I'm saying doesn't mean anything. So this is that time of really checking in you. And I would say, for the example that I gave you all, I was on the phone with my leader, so I couldn't see her. So it's like another reason. It was a Friday. I could tell she was stressed. I could just feel like in the tone too, with how I knew her. I just knew, like, okay, we didn't get the focused time that we needed to really talk through this situation where I could really feel heard. We were distracted. So there's my call out here too, just being very, very focused on your space, what you are saying, more so than just the words that are coming out of your mouth. And ultimately, respect. I challenge you to, in this conversation, you may be talking with someone you are so frustrated with, maybe even angry with. We can feel when we're not being respected. We can feel when the other person is just, again, not taking into account our lens. it doesn't feel good. It just activates those defense mechanisms. And if we are operating from the defense mechanisms, we're not having a real talk. We're not having an effective conversation. So in this conversation, if you cannot demonstrate respect for the other person, you really need to rethink, is this the right time? Is this possible? Like, those things need to be present for this conversation, as you would want to be feeling respected as well. So what's your emotional state? I hope right now it's all good. I hope you're enjoying this. This is helpful, but like, think about when you're in it, when you're really in this conversation, what's going to kick up for you? What are you going to have to manage as far as your emotional state? How are you, again, going to create safety? What do you need to pay attention to know whether or not safety exists for the other person or for you? But again, for you, you can only control you in this situation. What are you going to need to manage as you get into this? Let's give you a couple moments. You'll notice, again, the time for you guys to jot down notes are going to be a little bit less as we go along and make sure that we get all the content in. So as we move from this one, I know for myself, in my situation, I was like, all right, I need time, I need space to process and reflect and really get clear on what I'm hoping to achieve, on achieving those outcomes that I called out in the beginning. So I know that I want to have a little bit more time with my leader. I was out for essentially 6 months. You know, that's a good chunk of time to be out. I wanted to reconnect with her and be rebuilding our rapport so that I could then go in and have this type of conversation. So I decided that I needed a couple weeks as far as being back, really seeing what was going on. And then I wanted to, for sure, either it was an in-person or have it be a virtual conversation so that we had our private space and we could see each other and be able to really see our body language, all of those things, and really connect. So moving from there, the next bit is state your reality. Now, this is something that I actually have really appreciated over time, how Brene Brown is a researcher into shame and vulnerability, huge in the TED Talk space, has multiple books, her own podcast, and I know that she shares this throughout, but in particular in Dare to Lead. She calls out how each of us have stories in our head. So as human beings, with that emotional reaction, when something happens, we instantly start filling in the blanks of what occurred with our story. And that could be anything. So your story could have you being the hero in it. It could have you being the villain. So the critical thing is for really us to manage that story in our heads before it runs wild. So when I think about that and my particular example, when my leader responded in that way, it caught me so off guard. I instantly, my heart was pounding. And I instantly thought, oh my gosh, she doesn't trust me. She doesn't trust me to actually get my work done. I'm not actually a good leader then if she doesn't trust me. How am I going to do this? I want to be an excellent mom. I want to be an excellent leader. I want to contribute greatly in both of those spaces. How am I going to do this? I can't do this. This is not possible. I'm going to get fired. We're going to be out of a house. So in like 15 seconds, it went from, hey, Janelle, that's not really possible, to I'm going to be completely broke. My family is going to be out on the street. So this is critical to take the step back and simplify this. Check that story and let's really simplify it. So in particular, when I think about that, it's real simple. I was expecting that she was going to be totally fine with these requests. I had all evidence to suggest that, hey, this would be good. Like we're moving into, we want to create irresistible experiences for our employees. This would be irresistible for me. Whoop, what I observed was not that. No, Janelle, we can't do that. And in fact, you know, what you're asking for, That's not reasonable. So instead of going off into my story, I need to now bridge the gap between what I was expecting and what I observed with facts. And now, how do I do that? So in this piece, this is the critical, almost like the conversation opener on these, where you are sharing the impact in this situation, the impact of the other person versus the impact of what occurred versus assigning intent to them. And when I say really assigning intent, it's like judgment. So with my leader, when we reconnected, I had that space that I talked about, and I said, hey, you know what? I want to reconnect with you on our conversation around the flexibility I was hoping to have. When you shared that it couldn't be remote and that 9:30 may even be too late, the story in my head is that there may be a lack of trust between us, and that flexibility is unreasonable for some reason. Can I understand your perspective? You know, me asking for that flexibility, I feel uncomfortable asking for it, and even I'm uncomfortable now, and she knows that too. So we're very honest around me, and I've flat out shared, I think even in that conversation, my skeleton wants to jump out of my body. This is the impact of that conversation, not you made me feel this way. It's this is the impact. Can I understand your perspective? What am I missing? When I shared that with her, she then said, oh my goodness, I can see that. I can see that, how that impacted that way. Let me share with you a little bit more context around what's happening in the organization right now, and the pressures upon me right now too, as the leader of the people team. So it was critical in this time to really say, hey, here's the impact of this, and then instantly invite her perspective. I didn't go too far down the path. Okay, so I think, you know, ultimately you're going to fire me. It's boom, 1, 2, 3. Here it is. I know I'm missing something. Help me fill in the gap so we can figure out the best outcome together. Because at the end of the day, I want to be an awesome leader and I want to be an awesome mom. And I know that she wants that for me. So I have up here some examples, some other ways in where you can start the conversation. I've noticed that for folks, it's typically really challenging to just even start the conversation. So you heard an example of mine. You know, I really do love, I have to give all due credit to Brene Brown. The story in my head about what happened is critical. Folks that work with me now, they all know, they call it the Janelisms. I got a few Janelisms that folks have adopted. Rock and roll is another one. But, you know, it's in many times in conversations, I sit and say, okay, at this point in the conversation, the story in my head is that we're going right. This is the direction we're headed on this project. Is that where we're headed? Oh no, we should be going left. So it's not only this point of identifying, hey, here's the impact of this, it's also gaining clarity around what are we actually talking about. I think we have different perceptions about what just occurred. Can we brainstorm this further? I need your help with something. Can we talk about it soon? Yeah, and set the time up to talk about it. I'm hoping to reach a better understanding. I really want to hear your perspective and share mine so we can align. So for you all, what's your reality in this situation? What might their reality be? What parts of your reality might be assumptions, as in what part of them might be a story that's in your head? Again, in any situation, there's your perspective, there's my perspective, and reality is somewhere in between, and we got to get to that. And how do you engage the other person? One of those questions, what are you going to start with? to learn about their perspective while sharing the impact. All right, go ahead and take a few moments. Now, tip 3 goes right in to tip 4. So tip 4 is create dialogue through curiosity. So is you're really engaging the other person's perspective, it's staying in the conversation by being curious. In particular, and this is pulled directly from Crucial Conversations, the pool of shared meaning. Let me bring it back to, well, actually, no, I'll keep it to my example. So at King's Hawaiian, we are creating, we want to have irresistible Hawaii-based foods so that families can share that, those special moments, so that anyone over food can have those special moments, those joyous moments together. So think over Thanksgiving, Christmas, and we want like it all year round. And so part of that, when we translate that into what we want our employees to feel, we want them to have irresistible experiences. So I'm an employee. So yes, I'm a leader within the people department trying to bring this strategy to life. And I'm an employee who just went out on a leave of absence, who just had a baby, and I'm coming back. So I'm experiencing all of the things in this critical moment. And there's a huge opportunity to create an irresistible experience for me. So it's crucial that my leader creates the space so that I can come to her and contribute to this pool of shared meaning, as in literally I feel safe so that I can say, hey, I'm uncomfortable asking for flexibility. This is what my experience is right now. And when we gain a better understanding about my experience, we can then learn and create better experiences for other folks that are coming back from leave, for new parents. So think of these as an opportunity, whether it's work, whatever the situation is, you're creating the space where all ideas are on the table so that you can choose the best path. It's not about, oh, you absolutely have to agree and it has to be my way. This isn't about getting your way. This is about making sure we're having that honest conversation so that we can determine where we're gonna go from here. What is that gonna look like? But we can't make the best decision if we don't have all ideas on the table, if the pool of shared meaning is not added to. So critical in this is staying curious. Honestly, the best conversations that I've ever had where I've leaned in and they've been difficult are ones that I've spent more time listening, more time taking in other perspectives, more time asking questions and learning. So really, the amount of times in these conversations that I say, what happened, or tell me more about that, a ton. I want to ensure I understand you. Here's what I heard. Let me check in at this point. What's your understanding of what I'm saying? How does what I'm saying impact you? Where's my blind spot in this situation? So remember back to the question that I asked my leader, just what am I missing? What don't I understand right now? In particular, as we went on in the conversation, I did ask her, what's the story in your head right now? Here's the story in mine. What's the story in your head? What else is going on here that I don't understand? When I asked to be remote in that timeline, like what's happening across the organization? What are the conversations? What do we need to be thinking through? Because I mean, like most organizations in the US right now, folks are really grappling with this post-pandemic, hybrid, fully remote, fully on-site concept. Like this is an active conversation around, yeah, but how do we have that togetherness in our culture and do what we need to do? All the way to, of course, like there's absolutely roles that need to be on site. Healthcare, absolutely roles that need to be on site. Manufacturing, we have folks, they need to be on the line making the rolls. So how do we grapple with that conversation right now And so it's really important in this that I was staying very curious, because this also not only informs my flexibility and what can be brought to life, but also what we need to bring to life for our people, for what we say at Kings of the Ohana. So really spent way more time just staying very curious in this versus judgmental. So for you all, what specific questions would you open up with to engage in that genuine conversation, to get their perspective? What are you curious about? How would you pose that positively? And when I say positively, it's again, I want you to be authentic. So I don't want you shifting so much so you're not saying what needs to be said. It's just think about how you present it in a way where somebody can truly contribute to that pool of shared meaning versus being in their defense mechanisms. Go ahead and think about what are some questions, and I'll go back to this slide so you can take a look and potentially jot some of those down if they're helpful. Okay. You will stay in curiosity for a while in these conversations, and that's great. This is really, that's going to be a lot of where you're talking through is just really exploring and seeing where you're at. But when you come to the conclusion, you're coming to, okay, now what? This is often a step that's missed with folks. So we've done all of this work, but then we've missed actually like taking action, identifying really what we learn and what's going to shift. And so this is where it's critical that we really understand that our intent is not necessarily our impact. What you think you said may not be what they heard. So throughout this conversation, you could still be having two totally different conversations. People can walk away with totally different messages. So it's so important as you're coming to a close and really figuring out, great, what do we do next from here, that you both, or the group, really matches your intent to your impact. Did what you said, is that what folks are walking away with? So what will you both, or the group, whatever the conversation, whoever it's between, what are you all going to stop doing, start doing, continue doing as a result of this conversation? I love stop, start, continue. It is so helpful, even in just, again, aligning on different projects, things of that nature, but truly, for Amy and I, my leader and I, we shared, and I shared at the end, okay, so what I'm understanding is that we need to stay really close because this is still an evolving situation here around our hybrid environment. So what I really want to start doing is making sure that I'm very connected with you as things come up. So as I, struggle one day and getting her to daycare and then coming in and there's an impact, I want to be able to stay close with you and stop any story that may be happening about why, and just say, hey, here's my experience right now. Here's what's happening. How can we, what can we do together to figure this out? So truly, at that time, it's just, in this conversation with her is around, I just want to make sure that we are connected, that we start being more connected, we continue staying connected as they navigate really coming back to work and getting back into the full swing of things. And we both agreed on that. Now, if we had talked about that and her and I were still not on the same page, we would end up going back and circling back into the conversation, which is what's going to happen. When you go back and agree, like, okay, here's what I heard, here's what we're going to do, here's what we're going to start, stop, continue doing, you may hear that you have different perspectives, and that's okay. So what you heard was this. I heard this. Let's talk about that. Tell me more. What do you mean by this? What's your interpretation of this? What's your interpretation when we say, oh, we're going to be more respectful to one another? Well, what does respectful mean to you? What does respect mean to you? What are you really talking about underneath that you need to see shift? And finally, honor the work that you just did. So for my leader, hey, thank you. And that's how it really did end. It's just, thank you so much for having this conversation with me and for creating the space where I could bring this to you. This was, like I shared, this was really uncomfortable for me to ask this because, you know, at the end of the day too, I do want to be that best leader. It's really vulnerable to ask for this type of flexibility because I feel like I'm not delivering. I feel like I'm not exceeding expectations. I want to. So this is vulnerable for me to really have to engage in this way. And I truly appreciate you creating this space and us being able to do this. So while you haven't had the conversation yet, or maybe, you know, maybe you have, and then you've got an idea of how you want to go back and have this and what actions you want to take, what would be ideal as a result of your conversation? So just think for a minute about, what would you hope for truly, like as a real tangible result? And how do you want to demonstrate that you honor this relationship? What would you say or do that is authentic? From a time perspective, because I do want to allow for a good amount of questions, I'm going to close out on our summary here from what things you're taking away with you. So we have all of our tips here. So in addition to the worksheet that you have, and either you're working on it, writing on it, I also have a one-page summary attached that really is like your takeaway. It can be your cheat sheet around bringing these tips to life. And here's my ask as far as your action. So make this real talk real. I want you to go back and really reflect on this and think through the conversation. Team up with someone. Call it here an accountability partner, whoever, practice this. And then I want you to take in the next 2 weeks, lean in and have this conversation. And it's always awesome too to really debrief. So if you tap into an accountability partner, let them know how it went. You know, when I first did this, one of the things, my initial conversation years ago did not go well. And I went back to my accountability partner and said, well, that was terrible. I got to rethink some things. And that was great. It was great to be able to chat that out with someone. So I ended up saying, hey, here's my glows from this conversation. I had a previous teammate. I was her leader, and she brought this to me. She's like, hey, I'd like some feedback. What are my glows and grows? So glows, what I did really well, and grows, my opportunities to improve. So also love that little hack too, as far as just getting that fast feedback on, you know, where you're rocking and rolling, what you want to continue doing, and where you'd want to shift, so that you ultimately are having more effective conversations. All right, so with that, happy to take any questions or comments. And then I also have my contact information up there in the event that you all want to connect with me further. Love to stay connected and love especially talking about this topic.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Janel. Before I go on to the questions, I have got one comment that's come up, and somebody's put great point about the way one's face looks.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's
I've got one of those faces too. So.
Well, and you all may see it. We talked about this as we were gearing up for it. As I was clicking with my camera coming on and off, it's literally as we're navigating it, so I could see my face too at times. So I apologize if that was an impact to you all, but I really want to understand, like, is my face sharing to you all what I'm hoping for and what I hope you guys want to walk away with from this session. But yes, your body language is so critical. If you have never gotten feedback about your body language, go to somebody you trust, and go to somebody, not necessarily like you don't trust, but maybe somebody you're really frustrated by, in particular the person you're frustrated by, because they probably get your resting face. So highly recommend getting that feedback.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Okay, we've got a question here. Is okay, what if the person I need to talk to is really tough, you know, and won't listen? Now what do I do?
Yeah. So I truly wish it's like I could give you a magic wand and then it's like, boom, you can control the the other person. But as I shared, so you can only manage yourself. You can only control yourself. So I will tell you, I have had conversations with folks, let's say even family members, where it's just all the way to it hasn't gotten through, and I've had to rethink through my relationship with them and my own boundaries. So here's what I say. Do the work to manage yourself. Do the work to really come at this in a way where you truly want to understand that other person's perspective, and you want to give them the gift. That's what I call it, the gift of them hearing your honest experience. Because a good amount of these situations, there's times, especially with somebody like me, where I don't share honestly, and the person has no idea that they're impacting this way. I give them no opportunity. So you go in as best as you can. And I've even said in certain conversations, hey, right now, this is the impact. Like, I cannot share this with you, and I'm truly worried that we're not going to be able to have a relationship after this. Is that what you're hoping for? What would you be hoping for right now? I have something that I really do need to share with you. I want to be able to do that so that we can achieve X, Y, and Z. And I'm really struggling to do that right now. What do you need to be able to have this conversation with me? So I'm not saying that ultimately at the end of the day, it's all rainbows on it, and you may have to make a tough decision about that relationship and what may need to shift and what boundaries you need to put in place. But more often than not, sharing with someone, hey, I'm literally unable to have this conversation right now. I'm struggling and I want to be honest. I want our relationship to improve. Folks are not waking up in the day to try and be jerks. The vast amount of them. I've only had like 0.001% of employees where I'm like, oh, okay, am I dealing with like sociopathic tendencies? But like more often than not, folks are not waking up to do that. So it's just really sharing, this is what's happening, this is what I'm trying to do, and this is what's getting in the way. Can we do this together? Is that possible?
Perfect. Leading on from that, I've had the conversation multiple times and the person doesn't change. What do you think I should do now?
Yeah. So I will say too, from a behavior change perspective, unfortunately, yeah, I mean, think about it. All of us have been on this earth X amount of years. It takes a lot to shift behavior. So it does. Some of these conversations, I'll just, again, personal example, I've probably had about 25 conversations with my dad to say, hey, can we have a real conversation versus you quoting sports facts to me right now? That's kind of how he manages it. So what I have ended up sharing, again, only being able to control myself and control my boundaries in that situation, is to say, hey, Dad, we've now had this conversation multiple times. Here's my ask. What does that look like for you to bring to life? Okay, you've said that before. This is still my ask. So I need to be able to have these things shift, or we're going to have a different approach, a different relationship. So don't hesitate to really share. I mean, I've even had it too where folks, where I flat out thought they were lying, and I said, okay, when we've had these conversations before, you've answered with this question, you've answered A, and then you've answered B. These two things are not true at the same time. They're not true. So help me understand how we can actually get to this shift. So it truly contextually is the balancing act of still bringing it up and saying and leaning in. And sometimes it's really hard to say. We've talked about this multiple times. I would in that also say, especially my leaders, if it's folks from like a performance perspective, you've had the conversation, folks are still not meeting your expectations, it is really, really critical to be curious. I'd say even fight some of that frustration too, to just say, okay, what am I missing? We've had this conversation 3 times. This was the expectation. This is what I observed. What am I missing in here that is not setting you up for success? that is leading to this. Whatever that filler is, it's to be really curious of what is getting in the way for this to happen, because the request that's being made may not actually be realistic for that person. It may not. And so you really got to like be committed to that curiosity to make sure you have turned over all stones and you understand. And yeah, at the end of the day, like, all things are in place for this to happen. This person's choosing not to, and now I need to engage in my own boundaries. I mean, I will tell you, with relationships too, I flat out said, I have asked for that multiple times. You are not respecting my boundary, and until you do, I can't connect with you anymore. This is a personal boundary.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Janelle, for your time today. Great presentation, great advice. Thank you. So thank you also to our sponsor, RSTI. And for more information about their training courses, please visit rsti-training.com. As promised, the answer to today's trivia question is, of course, Las Vegas. So congratulations to our winner, Tracy Moore. And just a quick reminder, you can attain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey, which will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 Art Category A CE credit by the HRA, and you'll be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. Please visit icewebinars.live for more details of all our upcoming ICE webinars and complimentary registration. Thank you once again for your time today, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.